And so the Suicide Scherzo ushers us into another session of Missiones. We're back again, folks. This is the afternoon session, following on from our late night missions last night, and also following on from an array of testing on this band and from Mr. ASE. So there we have it. This is a Corona stopgap. Now the lockdown has started again. We need to fill the space and find our way forward. So this is one way of doing things. So there we go. Back to our old theme music, the Suicide Scherzo from the Clockwork Orange, or the Beethoven Symphony No. 9, second movement, the Scherzo, a historic recording with William Furtwängler is chosen as our theme. And what we'll do is just meander on this afternoon. It won't be too active on my part. We'll just put a few things on the platter, a bit of OTR and a bit of nostalgia just for a couple of hours, just to fill this grey line period. And it's usually a time of the day where I can be sort of local to what's happening in here. Now, just a note that we are also streaming online. If you want to have a listen on the streaming service, there is one on YouTube under my call sign, a dedicated channel, vk3sl, as a YouTube channel, and also a broadwave streaming service which can be found under my QRZ page. So just look up my call sign on qrz.com and you'll find links to a second streaming service. So 2 streaming services, 2 frequencies. And we are also transmitting on UHF at the moment. We're testing UHF out, and this is a new arrangement. So so far so good, and we are emitting on 438.725. That's 438.725 megahertz. So UHF, HF and streaming. All right, let's kick off with something that we did a lot of last year. We were constantly listening to these Associated Recording Program Service transcription records, and they sort of served us very nicely. And is that right? I think we're ready to go. This is hi-fi from the 1930s. They sound amazing, and I really enjoy playing them. So this is Bob Crosby and the band from about 1933.
under the palm trees by the sea, with breadfruit and yams. We'll never need the A&P in that romantic isle in the West Indies. No airplanes above. We'll watch the turtles at their shindies, you and me and the Caribbean and love.
Yes, somewhere I'd rather be. Ireland in the West Indies, Bob Crosby, and that is on an associated recording program service transcription record using wideband RCA equipment. Now, let's have a listen to Wake Up and Sing. This is vk3sl testing.
Robin, if you do some throbbing, you'll be humming coming home at night. Wake up and sing, la 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 la, be a bob white. Pucker up and whistle, and you find that this'll make you whistle coming home at night. While the coffee is perking, keep the vocal cords working. Ta-da-dee-dee, ta-da-da-da, off key, on key, any old key, just wake up and sing, la 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 la, start the day right. It's a great builder-upper and a roundabout supper. You'll be humming coming home at night.
Hi-Fi from the 1930s, the music of Bob Crosby's band on a Vitatone transcription record. Nostalgia here on 160 metres and UHF, as well as streaming service. These are the Corona Missions afternoon session. So, yep, we're back. Just as long as the lockdown lasts, it's some form of madness, some bad itch that gives a little context to the day. Well, we'll continue now with something Chinese. It's Chinese New Year. Well, it was last night until everyone had to go home before midnight. Alas, we will now play a tribute to our Chinese listeners. We have here a Chinese pop rock record. Pop says pop rock. And it features the artist Wang Zhangyu. Apparently she was the Bridget Bardot of her time from the 1960s. Anyhow, they're big soupy arrangements. Great missions fodder. This is vk3sl testing.
湖水成了湖水，我沉溺在无底的眼泪湖中，无法达成少女的愿望，原是一场梦啊，亲爱的，我想知道。 湖水成了湖水，我沉溺在无底的眼泪湖中，无法达成少女的愿望，原是一场梦啊，亲爱的，我想知道。
Music of Wang Zhangyu. Let's continue with the rest of the album. vk3sl testing.
手上的花片片落在几片飘水面，水乡诉中此恨绵绵，并结双影。 月下花前，四季永记心田。那一天，你说了声再见。 带走了我的情，却留下了你的眼。啊，我忘不了那苏州的夜晚。月升山边，星光闪闪。 相思众生，闯到山眉边。 样的相思间。嘿，让我轻轻地敲你心门，问这感情是真是假，不管多少甜言蜜语，不如一丝真情真意。嘿，让我静静地贴你心房，听它弹出你的回答，不要听那花腔怪调，只想知道温情多少。我祈祷人间有温情，人间温情多么伟大，它是那毒素发獠牙，冰霜也会被它融化。啦啦啦啦啦啦啦啦啦啦啦啦啦啦啦，温情多伟大。嘿，让我静静地靠你身旁，听你细说你的希望，我要保系这份情感，让你知道心的温暖。我祈祷人间有温情，人间温情多么伟大，它是那毒素发獠牙，冰霜也会被它融化。啦啦啦啦啦啦啦啦啦啦温情多伟大。这一件事情多么波折，为什么我要这样做？我在欺骗他，也是欺骗我，我的心里真难过。啊，有谁能够了解？谁能了解苦恼的我？忙不真心话，叫我向谁诉说？他对我实在不错，我心更难过。但愿有一天，求他能够原谅我。这一个世界多么稀奇， 每一样东西都美丽，好像走进了一个新天地。我的心里真欢喜。有谁能够了解？谁能了解我的情意？我愿做春风，带着温暖，吹遍大地。我愿意变着春雨，洒在你心底。春风和春雨，就是我的情和意。带来一阵雨，使我感到太凄迷。在这寂寞纱窗里，我为你哭泣。春风带来一阵雨，使我多么想念你。在这长翠草原的高声呼唤着你。长翠的草原地，找不到你的踪影，好在梦里，到底何处去？寻找你，寻找你，寻找你。我要在这春风里，朝夕不停等着你。为了等你，我只好打扮得更漂亮。长翠的草原里，找不到你的踪影，好在梦里，到底何处去？寻找你，寻找你，寻找你。我要在这春风里，朝夕不停等着你。为了等你，我只好打扮得更漂亮。他怎么不知道我的心意呢？绿虽绿，青山青，万紫千红春意浓。鸟儿飞絮，鸟儿鸣，万紫千红春意浓。有时青梅竹马，我俩一相逢，爱在飞跃，情在奔腾，人在欢笑中。绿叶上风中，小溪旁留下倩影，自然一片和谐，人间情深意重。 昨夜的冰雪消融，大地一片祥和，东亚同文同宗，携手相扶，齐心协力，昂首向前进。花开万紫千红，和谐进步了无穷。旗飘往邦前国，迈向世界大同。花开万紫千红，和谐进步了无穷。旗飘往邦前国，迈向世界大同，迈向世界大同，迈向世界大同。温暖的太阳，花园一般的街上，到处都洋溢着青春的芬芳。那美丽的橱窗，漂亮的衣裳，年轻人的愉快心情，像花朵怒放。阳春的冬季，阳头中。暖和的春风，吹过蔚蓝的天空，吹开了每一个年轻的心胸。咖啡店里飘荡着醉人的乐声，电话里低声细语，多么的甜蜜。阳春的冬季，阳头中。皎洁的月光，清楚冷静的夜空，放映出一对对年轻的生命。看完电影，喝口咖啡，又在跳过舞，甜甜蜜蜜并肩散步，情话如失恋。阳春的冬季，阳头中。
You heard it on 160 metres and UHF. This is vk3sl, and of course we've been listening to Chinese pop from the 1960s. Wang Zhangyu is the name of the artist. Don't know anything about her whatsoever, except the album. She looks very, very stylish on the front. A pop star from China. So there we go. That is in celebration of the new year. That wasn't, apparently. Well, that's what we're told. Okay, well, what we'll do is defer to an episode, if I can find it here. Is it gone? Has it gone? It's still here. This is an episode of, a segment from Late Night Live the other day. Now, this really caught my attention. I've been interested in Rosalind Norton for some time. She was known as the Witch of King's Cross. She was an erudite woman with incredible resolve and determination and independence, and was able to, well, do what a lot of people have never succeeded in doing, and that is being able to trailblaze her art and her different ideologies quite successfully. And it was also a slightly tragic story as well, particularly as far as it affected Eugene Goossens, the great conductor who fell under the spell of Rosalind. Not her fault. But it's a tale. It's a story that's just so larger than life, and there's been a movie made about it. In fact, I'll probably watch it tonight because it's just been uploaded onto Vimeo Stream, and it is a subject that completely fascinates me. So I won't say much else. We did feature a discussion on our missions last week about Rosalind, and I'll let this presentation speak for itself. This is vk3sl testing on 160 160 UHF 70 centimeters, and also online streaming service. Let's have a listen.
As I enter and leave this great building, the ABC's headquarters in Harris Street, I pass the biggest volume of space, and it's named for Eugene Goossens, the great British conductor, whose whose life was destroyed because of the wowzerish reaction to his relationship with Rosalie Norton. And it is Rosalie Norton tonight who we are going to discuss. Artist, into the occult, a striking figure in the 50s of Sydney, came to be known as the Witch of King's Cross. Now, her singular sexually liberated lifestyle and esoteric art meant that she was stalked by the yellow press and Mr. Plod. The cops hated her. Her paintings and drawings often depicted strange gods, demons, naked women, and she consistently faced charges of obscenity. Heavens above, at one point the cops even destroyed a couple of her paintings, and nobody in the art world came forward to defend this appalling act of censorship. As I said, the scandals eventually enveloped her lover, Sir Eugene, and we'll probably get into a bit of his relationship with her shortly. To hear more about the trailblazing Rosalind, I'm joined by Sonia Bible. Yes, the wonderful name, Sonia Bible. Sonia's an internationally recognised award-winning doco writer and director, and her film is called The Witch of King's Cross, and it's just been released. Welcome to the Little Wireless program.
Good evening, and thanks for having me on your show.
I believe you came to this via rat poison.
I did, actually. So some years ago, I made a history documentary for the ABC called Recipe for Murder. And that was about women who poisoned their husbands with rat poison in Sydney in the 1950s. It was quite a thing. And during the making of my film, I did a lot of research on tabloid magazines. I went through everything that I was at the microfiche at the time in the State Library, and also bizarre crime books and things like that. And I kept coming across stories about Rosaline, and I just kind of kept a little folder. I started a manila folder on her at the time. It just struck me as an interesting story. And I put it aside for a while, and I tried to ignore it, but something about it just kept gnawing at me, and I had designs on making a feature documentary next. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought that Rosaline's story had all those amazing dramatic elements to make a great film.
Well, her life begins dramatically in a thunderstorm. Give us a brief bio.
So she was born in New Zealand in 1917. She said she was born at 4 a.m. in a violent thunderstorm, and that she'd always loved night and storms all her life. And the family moved. They were quite a well-off middle-class family. Her father was in the Merchant Navy, and the family moved to Lynfield in the North Shore of Sydney when she was about 7. And so it was quite well-to-do, affluent suburb. And she says that from a young age, she always knew that she was different.
But she used to spend the night in a little tent in the garden.
So she says she lived in a tent when she was young in the backyard, and that she refused to sleep in the house, and that she had spiders and all the sort of little creatures that as pets, and frogs and toads and things, that she liked all the things that little girls are not supposed to like.
Well, this led to her expulsion from school for her problematic drawings of demons.
Apparently so. And she had done a drawing of Danse Macabre, the classical music piece, and that was one of the upsetting drawings. Classical music would have been around a lot in her family. Her father was a cousin of Vaughan Williams. So when you see some of those early drawings of classical music pieces, which is extraordinary for a young child.
Did you find out in your researches whether her work was to any extent inspired by Aleister Crowley, the great beast?
Well, certainly later on in life, when she was a grown woman, she was self-educated in a lot of ways. She knew a lot about all different kinds of paganism and mythology. And she certainly was a follower of Aleister Crowley and the practice of sex magic.
She clearly had a great graphic talent, but she loses her first job at Smith's Weekly at 16 because even then she was too controversial.
I've seen some of the cartoons that she did at Smith's Weekly. They were a bit rude and a bit naughty. So she tried a hand at cartoons. She tried at writing. She started out as a journalist. She was a very accomplished writer. She published her first stories at the age of 15. There was a book called 3 Macabre Stories. And then sort of settled on being an artist when she went to the National Art School.
Tell me about the poet Gavin Greenlees, because he becomes a very important part of her life.
Yeah, they met at some point. He was a lot younger than her. He was 13 years younger than her. He was also a prodigious talent. He'd won poetry prizes as a teenager. And they met, I think, working on a magazine called Pertinent, and, quickly hit it off. He was into sort of surrealism and altered states of consciousness. So was she. And that later on then they became lovers. But at first it was a connection of the minds.
Now, the cops hounded the two of them. At one point they go after her and Greenlees for vagrancy, of all things, a charge for people who didn't have a steady job. How did they get out of that?
So they were arrested for vagrancy. There was a well-known cop called Bumper Farrell, which he had it in for them. And they ended up in jail, and a publisher called Walter Glover he read about it in the newspaper, these two young artists who have been arrested, and he thought, I could do something about that. I could offer them a job. So he went down there and bailed them out and offered them to make a book where Rosaline would do the drawings and Gavin would do the poetry, and he would make this book of the art of Rosaline Norton with poetry by Gavin Greenlees.
And his reward for doing that is to be charged by, this is Glover, charged by the cops with producing an obscene publication, and the judge says that at least 2 images are obscene.
That's right. So as soon as the book was released, it got banned. They thought that they were going to get lots of publicity, so they were sending the book out to all these newspapers. And as you do when you're trying to get attention for something, and the newspapers, instead of sending it to the arts review department, they sent it to the tabloid department. And then next thing, there was all these articles like wild rampage on Sydney's sex book. These were some of the kind of headings, and the book got banned. And because the book got banned, then they were unable to export it into the United States because it was blocked by the Postmaster General.
But she broke that embargo. She sends copies to, and this is extraordinary, to Einstein, Carl Jung and C.S. Lewis. Did they respond?
They did. And she had quite a bit of correspondence with C.S. Lewis. He was very, very interested in her work. And so there's quite long letters from C.S. Lewis between her and him. Einstein was very interested in her theories on time and space. Carl Jung acknowledged the book. He was unwell at the time, so he couldn't really say much.
It seems to me that right from day one she knew how to play the media.
I don't think she really played it from the beginning. I think when she started out, she honestly thought that it's a good thing. You're an artist, you're putting on an exhibition, you want publicity. So I don't think she had any idea of what was going to happen. So that was the 1949 exhibition in Melbourne. And that's like, it was unexpected. But
now, enter stage right, Eugene Goosens, a megastar in this country and elsewhere, and he and she and Greenlees have a sort of a menage.
They do. So Eugene Goosens would have found the book in a secondhand store or something like that, and in the book there are artworks of classical music pieces. One of them is Symphonie Fantastique by Hector Berlioz, and there's Symphony in 4 movements. So for a conductor to see this book with pagan imagery as well as musical imagery, he was really interested. He wanted to know who this woman was.
He had a pre-existing fascination with the occult, didn't he?
He did, yeah. So he was involved in the occult in the UK before he came to Australia. So he wanted to meet her. They talked about doing an opera, and they were all bisexual, and there was a 3-way sort of relationship that they had.
Tell me about sex magic rituals, please.
So
don't feel inhibited. There's no one listening.
I have asked a few people who I've interviewed who know a lot about this. So the idea of sex magic is that you put an intention into the universe that the sex act is an act of spirituality. And so the people have an intention that they put out into the universe, and they have sex, and then when they climax, that they can kind of have this release of power and an intention into the universe. So
the orgasm becomes a form of magic in and of itself.
It does, yes.
Okay, so you can harness your will to harness change in the world through sacred sexuality. Take notes, dear listeners. You'll be asked questions afterwards. Well, that sounds incredibly useful. Now, Rosalind was also into astral projection. Tell me about her altered states.
So she started practicing trance art at quite an early age, I think around 23. And so she would use different things to get herself into a trance state, aromatic leaves, wine, and have a little ritual. And she would go into this trance state where she said she actually physically met the gods and goddesses of her pantheon. So she would meet Pan.
So these weren't metaphors for her. This is the real deal.
For her, it was the real thing. Yeah, so it wasn't like she didn't believe that she was dreaming. She believed that she was really meeting these creatures in this state. So she really believed that in an altered states of consciousness, you can harness all knowledge of all the universe, of time and space and everything that was before and after.
The most important god to her seems to have been Pan.
It was. So she was a pantheist. She believed that the god Pan was the god of the universe, and he was also the god of like creation and reproduction.
He's coming back into favour, isn't he, the great god Pan? It sort of fits the time rather nicely with our concerns about, the destruction of the environment.
That's right. So paganism at the moment is the fastest growing religion in the Western world.
You're kidding.
No. And I think people are looking for some kind of connection to nature. I've met a lot of the witches and pagans in Sydney, who, just through the making of my film. They're some of my hardcore supporters. And people celebrate, for example, here tonight we have the very small moon, it's on the eve of the new moon. There are people doing rituals tonight to the goddess Hecate, who is the goddess of the crossroads where we have this darkness. before the pagan moon tomorrow, which is also happens to be the Lunar New Year.
Am I keeping you from something?
No.
No, it's okay.
No, so I'm just a filmmaker. Like I'm not, I don't get involved in the stories. I
Sonia,
just keep
is that
outside.
true in this case? You seem to be absolutely drawn to it and so fascinated by this extraordinary woman.
Well, it's taken me 7 years to make this film, Philip. It's been long and it's been hard, and there's been a lot of hurdles along the way. So it's an incredible feeling now to have it finished and out there. But Rosaline has been with me the whole way because she faced such hardship in her life.
Exactly.
She never gave up. And so when things got tough for me and I got knocked back by film finance or whatever and I felt a bit depressed, I thought, well, that's nothing. At least I'm not in jail.
And you don't have a Detective Trevena following you.
No, I don't. So
Tell us about him.
So Detective Trevena was...
Trevena.
I'm not totally sure how you're supposed to pronounce it, but he had a personal vendetta against Rosaline. So he was a member of the Vice Squad, but he actually took it upon himself to pursue her outside of police business. He had journalists tail her. He had people break into her house. That's how they discovered Eugene Goossen's letters, is because her house was broken into and letters were stolen. And he actually got a journalist to tail Eugene Goossen's all around London, going to dodgy second-hand stores and things and buying some dodgy photographs, which is how Goossen's got caught. So
well, let's just rush through that. He collects occult and racing material on his trips. One time he comes home, the cops are waiting for him at the airport. He has his luggage searched. They find 1,000, quote, indecent photographs, as well as books, masks, incense and a quantity of strip film. And the fallout for him is disaster.
That's right. So he was charged, it was actually a customs charge of bringing in prohibited goods. It's not actually a very serious charge, but it was more the scandal of such a famous man. He'd only recently been knighted by the Queen. So this is a great embarrassment for the Queen. And so the people...
I think it's terrific.
People didn't really
embarrassing
want it
the
to
Queen.
be very well known. And so the court case was quite quick. He was only fined £100, but his career was destroyed. So he lost his job and he quickly left the country.
And he dies not long afterwards.
Not long after. He would have been very distressing for him.
Well, I'm all the more delighted that we've named this vast space, our great performance area, after him. Good on us. The ABC gets something right. So Rosaline becomes even more of an outcast?
Well, it's interesting because at the time, it wasn't published in the newspapers that she was involved with him. A lot of people presume that that's the case, but it wasn't. It wasn't. There was a tiny mention in a couple of articles, like he was involved with, and there were artists and there were local artists, but the headlines were not about their relationship. They were about him being caught with pornography. So that was the outrage. It didn't actually come out until quite a few years later in the press that he was involved with her. But everybody knew. Everybody knew. So the journalists knew. They weren't allowed to print it at the time, though.
What became of Rosaline?
Of Rosalind?
Yeah.
So she stayed in a relationship, like as a friendship with Gavin Greenlees, who went in and out of Callum Park Mental Institution. He had schizophrenia. And then later in life, she ended up getting herself a little flat down in Rosalind Gardens in King's Cross through the church.
Sorry? Through the church?
The church, yeah. The church, they really looked after her, actually.
Good on them.
I spoke to one of the nuns who looked after her when at the end of days, when she was in the hospice, that they used to visit her and check up on her. But yeah, she still did her art, and the young artists at the time, then the counterculture revolution had come along. The Yellow House was there, you know, young artists like George Giddos, who they were just young at the time, and there she was, you know, she was this older woman, and they just idolised her.
And of course, by then she was playing up to the reputation. She'd wear a witch's hat, for example.
Well, that happened for a while in the 50s, but then she withdrew from the media. And later in life, she completely withdrew and did her art. There was a stage there in the late 50s and in the early 60s where she really did play up to the media. And she was telling her stories in papers like the Australasian Post and things like that.
Now, to be faithful to her spirit, you feel compelled to take risks with the creative direction of the film.
That's right, because it's mostly a self-funded film, so I could do whatever I wanted, really. And I really wanted to, because I uncovered these major private collections of work, so I uncovered, because it took so long, diaries and writings and scrapbooks and her own theories on everything. I really wanted to include that and it not just be interviews and archive. So to get inside her head, I really had to find a visual way of explaining her inner world. So I cast dancers as Pan, Lilith and Lucifer, and we did like her life as performance art on this kind of mythical stage with these dancers, and so it's quite raunchy. I also wanted it to be raunchy because the sexuality was as part of her thing.
I can't wait. The Witch of King's Cross is now on Amazon, iTunes, Vimeo and Google Play. And I must tell you that her last words, allegedly, as she was dying, "I came into the world bravely, I'll go out bravely." I have a feeling she'd very much enjoyed the film.
I hope she does.
Good on you. And that's a chat with Sonia Bible. What's your next project?
I'm not sure, actually. I think I might have to do something easy next.
Okay, well, look, thanks for coming in, and it's been a delight to talk to you.
And thank you, Mr. A. What a story. A story that just is so larger than life. Story of Rosaline Norton. And that's what I'll be doing tonight, folks. I'm going to be watching the film and indulging in this extraordinary tale. Now, there is something of her. There's an interview with her, would you believe? She is interviewed on ABC doco, a very short ABC doco, on King's Cross in the 1960s. So it's very sort of stylised and 60s-ish. But let's have a listen to this, and it is just gold. vk3sl. Testing.
Some call it Australia's Barbary Coast, and there are a few pirates there for sure. Others call it Sin City, and there's some of that around too. One Sydney alderman wants it cleaned up. Another says it's worth $1 million a year the way it is. If you can believe what you read about it, the inhabitants make their living out of baccarat, dope, witchcraft, prostitution, stripping, and selling each other salami. But you can't invent anything about the place that isn't partly true. The cross is something that Sydney bears with a mixture of disapproval and delight. But you won't find it on any map, and there's no street sign that says King's Cross. It's a no-man's land with something for everyone. It has no boundaries to its name and no limits to its way of life. In fact, the cross is not a place, but a state of mind. From its heart, you can go about half a mile in any direction before you run out of the lights into the darkness of the outside world. A half mile there and back. A glittering mile of dreams, delusions, hopes, and headaches, where life comes out of an espresso machine, and you can have it any way you like it. What do these throngs of people still walking up and down the cross at midnight come here for? What do they hope to find? If you find all this commonplace, what about a bit of black magic? There's not as much about as there used to be in the days when Rosalind Norton had this notice on her door. And a chemist hung out a notice one night, gone to mass, black in half an hour. But Rosalind Norton herself, the most famous witch in Sydney, still has faith in her powers. If you look in any night at the Apollyon Lounge at the Cross, Apollyon, by the way, was the archangel of the bottomless pit, you might find Rosalind Norton as Suzanne Baker did.
Very, people always associate you with witchcraft, and some people even say they think you are a witch. What have you got to...
Well, I think about that. They're rather lagging behind the publicity that I've had, if that's all I think. Yes, most certainly I'm a witch.
Is it difficult being a witch?
I don't see anything in the world would be much more difficult not to be.
Are you ever sorry you didn't have, or you don't have a life that, say, ordinary people have, like getting married and having children?
Oh, God, and now I couldn't stand it. I'd go mad.
You know this one, Dave and Kevin?
Venus de Milo was noted for her charm. Strictly between us, you're cuter than Venus, and what's more, you've got arms. So let's go cuddle in a corner, any cozy little corner. Love is just around the corner when I'm around you.
There we go. I always have to go and have a cold shower. I think that was our little expose on Rosalind Norton, and that doco film about her is now in the public domain. Let's have a look, and we'll find something else to represent poor old Mr. Goosens. Oh, Eugene Goosens, this conservative British conductor who was the Dean of the Conservatorium of Music in Sydney and the head conductor of the Sydney Symphony Orchestra. He was an esteemed musician. Everyone adored Mr. Goosens, and he got the big gong from the Queen. He was just the big cheese. But he got caught up in the witchcraft circles, and poor old Mr. Goosens, he found himself entangled. And as the story said before, he was, well, he never recovered. He went back to England with his tail between his legs, and he, metaphorically, and then he just curled up in a ball and evaporated. He didn't give any more public performances, and it was the most meteoric demise of any artist. Let's have a listen to a work. He did conduct a few things in those last couple of years in England. He did sort of a few recordings for the Everest label. So we'll hear Mr. Goosens in his last hurrah, and he was a great conductor, in fact a most esteemed musical family. Two of his sisters were great harpists. His brother Leon Goosens was one of the greatest oboists of all time. Amazing family. Anyhow, we'll hear Mr. Goosens being conducting the London Orchestra, London Symph, I think it is, with the Symphonic Dance number 2 by Sergei Rachmaninoff. This is VK3sl testing, and we're waiting for the file to buffer up, and it's being really slow. Ridiculously slow. Here we go. So the music of Rachmaninoff, and that was conducted by Sir Eugene Goossens and the London Symphony Orchestra, recordings from the early 1960s, not long before Mr. Goossens passed away. And before that, we looked at the story of Rosalind Norton, who was a larger-than-life figure, an underground sort of figure really, but a remarkable woman an independent spirit, and she became intrinsically involved with Mr. Goossens, the conductor. So there we have a full circle there. Okay, well, what we'll do next is play an album, and I've got a Columbia record on the platter. This features Wilbur Cantwell at the piano and with a rhythm accompaniment. Now, Mr. Cantwell is sort of primarily known as a theatre organist, and this record popped up in a second-hand shop during my summer travels. Bought quite a few albums, LPs, of which we'll save up for the different, for the missions, and this is one of those. I don't know where I got it, Torquay maybe, somewhere. Anyhow, it's a 10-inch Columbia from the 1950s. Anyhow, we hear Mr. Cantwell with rhythm accompaniment. So we'll let this ride for a little while I go and do other things. I'll be listening inside. This is vk3sl, testing on 160 and UHF, and also streaming online. Let's have a listen. listening to the music of Wilbur Cantwell. And it's an album called May I Have the Pleasure. That's a Columbia recorded in Sydney in the 1950s. Mr. Cantwell was more or less, or more known as an organist than a pianist, but he does very well there. It's all very civilised, of course, after all that racy material with Rosaline Norton. Yeah, we have to sort of come back down to earth. So there we go. That's it. Wilbur Cantwell. Well, I'm going to change the record over. We'll have a listen to side B when I start the dinner. And while I'm turning the record, I think I have found a cartridge. Let's go back to about 1973.
Get set for the savings of a lifetime. You've seen them in your newspaper. You've seen them on telly. Now go get them today at Target's big birthday sale. For instance, a pair of single-bed floral cotton sheets, only $5.98 the two. Double bed size, $7.98 a pair. Men's quality shorts and knitted polyester casual shirts, $1.99 each. At Target's birthday sale today, where you can afford to buy quality.
There we go, our Target special. Well, we've turned the disc over. We're ready for side two. Let's hear more from Wilbur Cantwell with a rhythm accompaniment. Now, I have to say, it is very well recorded. It sounds brilliant in here. Through the big speaks, we get a nice, solid bass line, rhythm section and bass playing. So I'm quite impressed with this LP. Well, we shall continue. vk3sl testing. just been sharing in the fuddy-duddy zone. That's an album called May I Have This Pleasure, featuring the music of Wilbur Cantwell. It's off a Columbia 10-inch LP from the 1950s. So I think we need to move upbeat a little bit for the next 20 minutes or so. I think the past band's about 5 to 7 for these Corona missions, so we'll inhabit the home straight, and I think we'll hear some jazz fusion. I always like Chick Corea. I reckon we'll hear one of his albums or part thereof. This is from 1972, and it's an album called Return to Forever. And I think it features the vocals of Flora Purim, if I'm not mistaken. Anyhow, let's have a listen. This is vk3sl, test missions on 160 and UHF, and also streaming online. You can find my streaming service under the name, my call sign, and it's there on YT. And incidentally, I should say, the ident hasn't been working because I think I've had the wrong USB sound card plugged into the computer. I've changed them over. Hopefully it'll work this time and I won't be upsetting anybody. Right, let's move forward.
Hluboko nad věcí a jsem zas já, palčivá v záblescích. Hluboko nad věcí, lesklá a vzdálená, dívám se do sebe, vidím tvá ramena. Vidím tvá ramena. Vidím tvá ramena. Quiero salir de tu hacer más bello el camino, juntar esos sentimientos y hacer más bello el camino, juntar esos sentimientos y hacer más bello el camino. Juntar esos sentimientos y hacer más bello el camino. Juntar esos sentimientos y hacer más bello el camino. Juntar esos sentimientos y hacer más bello el camino. Juntar esos sentimientos y hacer más bello el camino. Červený oči a černá láska v běhu. Kožený bundy a v kafi mlíko z tuby. Nervózní prsty a jedovatou něhu. Zažloutlý taxíky a na krku tvý zuby.
Co bude s náma a kde na to brát sílu?
Brečíš, co máma, a za sklo strkáš fotky. Proč se mi směje ten měkký frája v grilu? Zabouchni dveře a svědomí je krotký. Červený oči a černá láska v běhu. Na čele říjen a postrašenej smích. Říkáš mi návrat, ale vzdalujem se břehu. Za 200 special a do džusu líh.
Co bude s náma a kde na to brát měru?
Brečíš, co máma, a co je u vás v sněhu? Červený oči a černá láska v běhu. Říkáš mi návrat a vzdalujem se břehu. 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 vzdalujem se břehu. A vzdalujem se břehu. A vzdalujem se břehu. Deštivý den, den samé bláto, vyjít si ven, nestojí za to, ono to zmrzí, odmítat s díkem, za každým druhým rohem, pána s deštníkem, venku to šplíchá a bez ustání svou hlavu línou já dám do dlaní, mé srdce váhá, nudě se zdráhá, můj celý život se mnou plouže, z bláta do louže. Venku to šplíchá a bez ustání svou hlavu línou já dám do dlaní, mé srdce váhá, nudě se zdráhá, můj celý život se mnou plouže, z bláta do louže. Quiso saltar un pozo, confiado en la proeza de su sangre, y hoy se le escucha delirar de hambre en el oscuro fondo de su gozo. El corazón se ahogaba de ternura, de ganas de vivir multiplicado. Hoy es un corazón tan mutilado que ha conseguido morir que ha conseguido morir que ha conseguido morir de cordura. Que son desangrados son corazón, que son desangrados son corazón, que son desangrados son corazón, que son desangrados, que son desangrados, que son desangrados son corazón, oh son corazón, oh son corazón, 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 corazón. Hablo de un corazón que se defiende de su vieja y usada maquinaria. Hablo de un parto en una funeraria. Hablo de un corazón que no comprende. Hablo de un corazón tan estrujado, tan pequeñín, tan pobre, tan quién sabe. En su torrente casi todo cabe. Sea real o sea imán, sea real o sea imán, sea real o sea imaginado. Que son desangrados son corazón, que son desangrados son corazón, que son desangrados. Oh son, corazón, oh son, corazón, corazón, corazón. Al corazón le faltaba su oreja, llamaba distraído por la calle, estrangulando con pasión un taller, incapaz de notar alguna queja. Corazón de torpe primavera hizo que le injertaran el oído. Tanta maldición oyó que ha ido. A que le den de nuevo su, a que le den de nuevo su, a que le den de nuevo su sordera. Que son desangrados, son corazón. Que son desangrados, son corazón. Que son desangrados, son corazón. Que son desangrados, que son desangrados, que son desangrados, son corazón. Oh, son corazón. Oh, son. S tmou záclon klinká, dlaň spánku dá. S tmou v loužích cinká, ve sklech pleská, pleská. K dešti choulí se klouže za límce dlaň, než na čelo dá. K dešti choulí se v šelmu, mění se teplem přede jak já. Vlas po vlásku, hlásek po hlásku, teď čavadugej, babadugej. V kapce koulí se koukej, na Řím se pleská, pleská. Dešť čuá, čuduá, what up čuá, what up čuá, what up čuá, k dešti choulí se klouže po lince, cinká na oknech samba, na sklo lepí se vzlídu, mění se v kolenou, slávne jak já. V psích nečasech mám ji ve vlasech, čavadogej, pavadogej. Tak choulím se, koukej, snažím se přes kam pleskám já. Čuá, čuduá, what up čuá, what up čuá, what up čuá, když
Okay, that was an abrupt finish. I was chopping an onion, listening inside, and suddenly the music stopped. Well, of course, it's not entertainment. These are just test missions on 160 and 2 metres, possibly ATV, I don't know. Yeah, there we have it. Chick Corea, Return to Forever with Flora Purim, who's a most wonderful Brazilian singer. I have to listen out for more of her music, and we might feature some more of her on our afternoon sessions. So that is pretty much the wrap. I need to get back into my other job, which is cooking dinner for 7. and we will wind up at this point, as we did all through the last lockdown, remembering the continuum for most of last year. In fact, from March right through to December, we didn't miss a beat. We had missions every night, and we weren't on UHF at that point, but we were doing it on 160, and it was quite an episode. And so, yeah, well, we will continue. I haven't got time. Once the normality resumes and I'm out and about doing kids' activities after school, I won't be able to do it then. But while we're in lockdown, I can sit here and do something, because it gives me a chance to connect with the collection and to make sense of a bizarre world. Speaking of a bizarre world, we will give an oblique nod to our humanistic trait of being like sheep. Now, where is it? Here it is. No, it's gone. I will have to find it now. I'm looking through the list, and it is here. Oh no, this is tragic. We have lost our. We'll have to go back to the history file. We'll scan through the history file and we'll find, here it is, Handel's Messiah, chorus, all we like sheep. Yes, this is the way I sort of see things in some respects. It's a dichotomy. There are so many tangents, so many worldviews, so many ways of trying to make sense of nothing, but this is one of them.
This is a test transmission from vk3sl.
Thank you very much. Cheers, folks. We'll see you here tomorrow.